I'm Trey Worley. I'm the president of the AAF, which is the Agnostics, Atheists, and Free Thinkers. We are the college group that organizes this event and makes sure that the room's available so that AOK can come out and have these awesome disbelief discourses.
Very good. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, everyone say hi. Alix Jules is a secular activist in Dallas, Fort Worth. He is commonly involved in issues and topics regarding the role of diversity in the atheist community, as well as atheism in diverse communities. He's the former chair of the Dallas-Fort Worth Coalition of Reason's Diversity Council and is a founding member for the Fellowship of Free Thought, a family-based organization founded on the values of secular humanism and charitable principles. Alix has been featured in Ebony Magazine under the article One Man's Journey into Atheism. He is in Godless, the documentary, and is a regular contributor to the Secular News Network and Pathos. He is also a regular host on the Dogmatic podcast, and that's what he's most well known for. Did I get everything right in there, Alix?
Yeah, that's fine. Trying to get selfies off of a monitor aren't fun, but yeah, whatever. All right, do we want to start with a Q&A and brief discussion? I know a lot of people have been reaching out to me to talk a lot about what's been going on in the humanist world and what's been going on in Black Lives Matter and how they can help. What do y'all want to talk about? What do y'all really want to talk about? What's the burning thing? And okay, that's.
Well, I love that. I think the first question that I wanted to ask that was something that came up in a conversation earlier today. Is the question about just general diversity in the atheist community. Do you think we have a problem with diversity in atheism?
Yes, you do. We do. I don't want to say you do. This is something that I used to talk about. Ooh, she's taking a picture. Hold on, she's taking a picture. There you go. This is actually something that I used to talk about very early on in my career. It was, how do we get more diversity in the atheist community? And it's actually something that probably a year ago, I stopped talking about it because there really weren't many advancements. And I found that although we talked about it, we still kind of sort of talk about it, we haven't implemented a lot of the plans to make diversity a real priority. And the reality is, the atheist community is very, very capable. In fact, we tend to be a little bit more intelligent than the rest of the general population. And we also have, believe it or not, despite the students, we tend to have a little bit higher discretionary income than the majority of people. So when it comes to, can we make diversity a priority? If we wanted it to be, yes, we absolutely could, but we haven't been. But I think part of the issue is you should expect it to be a problem because of just demographics. When you take a look at the general population as a whole, you've got roughly 60 some odd percent that's predominantly white. Then you take, and of that number, you have a much larger population that identifies as atheists. When you take a look at the Gallup polls, it's suggesting anywhere in upwards of 30%. Now, that's for the general population. That's basically for everyone. When you take a look at what's going on with the Latino community, you're seeing closer to 8%, maybe 9% secularism, which is great, which is absolutely phenomenal. Not all Catholics, or not all Hispanics are Catholics. Now, unfortunately, some of them are becoming more Protestant as we see population shifts, but you have potentially up to 10% of the Hispanic population that says, hey, we're secular. Would you like to guess what percentage of African Americans are actually identify as atheists? 0.04, not 4%, not 4%, less than 1%, 0.04. And when you take a look at the Eris polls, um, when you actually see how religious African Americans are, I think the question is how many of you believe that God plays an active role in your daily lives? It's in excess of 90%. Same poll shows the general population closer to 68, 69%. So there's a massive gap. Now, what makes that disparity so sticky? Well, some of it is cultural. Some of it is tied to race and identity, simply because it's kind of hard separating. I think I've said it before. Separating church and state is easy, but separating church and race, not so much, especially in the African American community. It's been anathema, calling yourself a black atheist or African American atheist, whatever the prefix. People don't like the term atheist, and it's because so much of the narrative has been anti-atheist. Specifically, it's not just we need God; it's been very much anti-atheist. We take a look at Steve Harvey, D.L. Hughley, the really well-positioned quote unquote black elites, and yeah, they identify as ultra religious. When you take a look now, that is changing. That is changing. I'll get back to that in a second. But when you start having conversations on the role of the church in the civil rights movement, that's where we see the biggest sticking point, because African Americans do, look at the civil rights movement as somewhat of a religious movement, right? And it really wasn't, but we don't talk about it, and that's a problem with the education system and history. Because when you take a look at a Philip Randolph, Langston Hughes, and some of the other grandfathers in the civil rights movement, they just never get credited as being secular. So when you see Jesse Jackson, it's Reverend Jesse Jackson, Reverend Martin Luther King, it's Reverend this, Reverend that, and again, there's good reason for that, because back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the black church was the safe area. It's what people had, outside of the bombings, the fires, et cetera. And there is history of that made African Americans in the South, in particular, South and Ohio and some other places, it made them very vulnerable, but it was still a rallying point. And of course, that goes back to antebellum slavery, where you had the only book, if you were going to learn to read anything, the first thing you're going to learn to read is the Bible. So you have this culture of religiosity that is intrinsically tied to race and religion for African Americans. So it's no real surprise that you don't have a huge number of African Americans that identify as atheists. But then you have the secondary problem of, well, now that they do identify as atheists, how do you bridge the gaps that still exist culturally, right? We don't live in an atheist bubble, black or white, it doesn't matter. You don't live in an atheist bubble. And we are, believe it or not, highly segregated as a country. Now, part of it, some people will say, it's self-segregation. In parts, that's true. But I have to remind people that you start looking at the Civil Rights Act and the Fair Housing Act, et cetera, these bubbles or ghettos that wind up becoming black meccas where people are still trying to escape. That wasn't signed until the 60s, and even until the early 70s, where there were some serious issues and violations, and well into the Reagan years, we saw constant arguments there. And take a look at the schools. Most of the schools, I think it was 90 some odd percent of American schools, are actually segregated. And what we mean by segregated is one race, right? One race, predominant race of 90+%. That's high segregation. We just had a school district in Mississippi that was, in this day and age, 2016, less than 60 days ago, They were forced. They were told specifically, you are going to desegregate. We're going to challenge your. I mean, they were officially segregated still. So it's very difficult to escape those cultural lines, those very societal lines that contextualize why we are separate as atheists. Now, again, with that said, the atheist movement has been predominantly white, right? I mean, when you take a look at the four horsemen, well, or four white horsemen and not one black horse. Ha ha ha. So when you start looking at who are the names in atheism, who do you see? I mean, you had Dennett, you had Dawkins, you had Hitchens, and I'm missing someone.
Harris.
I don't want to talk about him, but yes, Harris as well. Harris as well. So yes, it's not surprising that we didn't see models that were saying, "Hey, come on over, come on over," and that's actually why I became an activist. Um, uh, quick story. The reason I got into activism 6 years ago was because my son, who went to a predominantly white school, um, uh, happened to get into, we brought Camp Quest to Texas, and it was a big deal because it's Texas. You don't have atheist camp in Texas. You have Bible camp in Texas. Your variations are a Bible camp are what version of Southern Baptist do you want? Camp. Do you want the Jesus camp, or do you want just the vacation? So Camp Quest, we brought Camp Quest to Texas, and he decided, it was big news. It was huge news, and they decided that they wanted to get one person or maybe two on camera and talk about the experience and why Camp Quest was important to them. He volunteered. He was 13 years old, and we had the conversation and said, this could have some serious ramifications, but he was a mature 13-year-old, and he said, no, I want to do this. This I want to do. I'm like, okay, then we're going to do this. And he did an interview, and it wasn't a big deal, or we didn't think it was a big deal. And it was the middle of August. Nothing happened in September. I was kind of alleviated. Come October, still nothing. And we're like, okay, great, no issue. Well, come December, it turns out that some of the churches were using his interview clip to, basically rally people against atheist children because we're coming for your kids, right? We're coming for your kids. And that wound up hitting a few churches, and that eventually turned into a bully situation where kids, attacked him in school, and black kids, and they told him outright, like, there's no way you can be an atheist. You're black. You have to believe in Jesus. And as much as angry I was at this idea, it was hard to be mad at them because this was a narrative that has been around for a very long time. So I kind of needed to make a decision right then and there. What was I going to do about this? I could sit around and just be angry. I could sit in the administrative offices for days on days and hope that they resolve this. And eventually they did. There were suspensions and what have you. And that was great. That was great. But it didn't address the narrative that these children had, which is you can't be black and not religious. And so that's why that's actually the reason I got involved in activism. I had to show people that, yes, you could. It wasn't, there might be a cost, but it wasn't a big one. And that's how I started my journey. It was, hey, I've got to show people that you can be black and not Baptist. You can't be black and not Catholic. You can be black and use the A word, atheist, atheism. It doesn't kill you. And I accept it. I embrace it. And when I came out and tried to get involved, there really weren't any other people that were out there having this level of conversation about race and religion, especially in the Black community. That eventually gave rise to people like Mandisa Thomas and Black non-believers. Who I happen to chair the Dallas chapter of Black non-believers as well as president, and a lot of different multicultural groups that are offshoots of this kind of outreach into minority conversations. Now, also, what I found when going to conferences and having conversations with people, there was a little bit of a disconnect or a gap with some of our interest, because although I like to say, yes, we are all one utopian race, the reality is America doesn't allow us to be. This is a societal a contributing factor to who we are and our identities in America. We can't escape our history yet. I'm not sure we ever will, but because it is endemic and written into American fabric, it seems. But how do we address how so many people come to atheism, which was very much an academic exercise for many, and still for many African Americans, it is an intellectual exercise. It's an academic one. We have so many intellectual thinkers. We have philosophers who talk and posit about God, but there's a very pragmatic conversation that we can have about social issues and the role of God, and it winds up being more of the moral conversation about God. It is, or the argument of morality, the argument of evil. And a lot of African Americans tend to approach their belief system or their belief structures based and how they derive atheism as or come to atheism. It's usually through that discussion, not necessarily or not only the intellectual one. I think, therefore I am, therefore there can be no God. The ontological argument, the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are hundreds of arguments to be made against the existence of God, but it's kind of hard to actually be Black in America and say, oh, yes, there absolutely is a God and we are his favored. You can't do that. You simply can't do that. And so a lot of African Americans, like I said, got that way or arrived to their atheism that way. And if you think about it, if we're not talking about those, there's no impetus for us to come find you, to come meet and have these conversations, because our realities are still very much apart. They're different. We like to talk about privilege. You can make it a conversation about privilege, or you can make it a conversation about the different realities and different experiences that are just very real. Being Black in America is different from being white in America. And if you're not going to talk about it within the context or the social context or social justice issues, where the question of God and religion are just as pertinent, then it's kind of hard to incent African Americans to go out there and have this conversation with you, which is also why when I did do my diversity talks, one of the first things I told people to do is to get comfortable with your discomfort, because African Americans aren't going to come to you. You have to go find them.
What do you think is the most effective way for groups like ours to reach out to the African American community, or should we?
I've gone back and forth on this one for about 5 years, and the answer is it tends to be regional. I think it's difficult for a predominantly white group to go into a Black neighborhood, whether it is a bunch of atheists or a bunch of theists, and say, here, we're here to help, because there's this cynicism, there's this mistrust that just exists, right? I mean, it really just exists. It may be earned historically or culturally or not at all, but it is there. implicit biases, they cut both ways. And so you reaching out to them is, can sometimes be met with disbelief, unless you're looking at bridging it through interfaith dialogue, which many atheists don't want to do. If you take a look at the social dynamics, if you call yourself a humanism and you're working in minority neighborhoods, you have no choice but to work with interfaith groups. I don't have, one of the things that there's been a few activities, whether it's food banks or feeding the homeless, the Homeless Nexus Project, et cetera, that we have down here in Dallas. I don't have the ability to say I'm only going to work with atheists, because I'm never going to be able to reach the people that are in need. And so when I do go out there into the streets and have the conversations, or under bridges and overpasses to hand out, I'm wearing my atheist shirt. No ifs, ands, or buts about that, right? Because I think one of the biggest things that we have is a PR issue. Yes, we have our own issues as well, but the PR issue is one that we're trying to escape. I don't want to get political, but one of the things that that one particular party wanted to slander, Bernie Sanders with was he's an atheist. He's an atheist. Well, it's kind of hard to make the case for that not being slanderous if we don't have this context, this American context of, well, why is that a bad thing, right? I mean, if he is an atheist, so what? So going out there and doing good with a big old atheist shirt, should be fine. I often caution people about, don't wear the upside down T-shirt that says, Jesus died on the cross, be right back. Don't wear that one, right? Because that's going to alienate. I say it because I have the shirt, right? And every once in a while, I start looking at it like, no, I can't wear it. It's just that you can't do that when you're trying to bridge something more. It's not uncommon for, my 5-year-old has this project. It's called the Mars Superheroes, and what she does is in the summer, she has little bags, and it gets really hot in Texas. Today is like 100 degrees, 105 degrees, and so we have frozen bottles of water and a little bit of food, and et cetera, and we have snacks. So anytime she's either driving with me or she's driving with her mom, and she sees someone that is in need, she'll point it out. She's like, right there. And we'll stop the car, run out, and say, here you go. And the common response is, oh, thank you, God bless. And our response is, you're very welcome, but God had nothing to do with it. And then if they want to engage in that conversation, that's fine. A lot of times people will just get it and be like, oh, okay, thank you. And that was enough, right? So going out there and trying to engage with the African American community and making that first step, yeah, I think that it makes sense as long as it's not artificial. It's going to be uncomfortable, but as long as it's not artificial, then it's not a problem. Now, when you start doing these service oriented projects, I find that if you publicize them properly, as in it's not a big promo gig, it's not just an opportunity to take pictures, and you're generally going out there, or whether it's another type of social cause that affects minorities disproportionately, whatever those are, as long as you're getting involved in those, you can actually build a real rapport, and it shows that you actually care. And right now, we're a little bit beyond, especially in American politics, American discourse, we're beyond a lot of the saying and a lot of the talking about it. African Americans want to see you show up, right? And so that's what's really important. Show up. We still live on separate sides of the track. You want to have an atheist conversation? Find a UU church in a black neighborhood. Go have that conversation there, or find neutral ground and have that conversation. Invite African American speakers to those spots. You might be really surprised. In fact, you will be surprised at who shows up. I think about there's been about three groups that have formed coalitions by accident, completely by accident, by either I or Mandisa showing up in a place because we're invited, and all of a sudden, hey, we try and get them to steer into neighborhoods that they typically wouldn't go, or venues they typically wouldn't visit. We promote it, and African American atheists or Latino atheists will come out there, and all of a sudden you have a relationship. They see you, they can begin to believe you, and you might be able to develop a lasting coalition. And they're going to be small groups because the numbers are really small. So it may be a group of just 3 or a group of 5, but imagine what kind of cultural mixing or cultural dialogue that you can have there, and then potentially, being able to foster an environment where diversity is actually warranted and needed and cultivated. Here in Dallas, the Fellowship of Free Thought is extraordinarily diverse, and I tell them that it's probably because your very second executive director was a Black guy. And they happen to be one of the largest organizations in Dallas, and I want to say that their meetup numbers are close to 2,000. The actual active members, we started with about 20 people 5.5 years ago, and right now there are hundreds of members that are active every single day, trying to build and change community, and a lot of them are diverse. So you got to get out there and do it. Now, there's this other problem that you have, which is driving African Americans out of the movement when they get here, because there are many toxic agents that are within the movement. In fact, if you take a look at specifically YouTube atheism, never read the comments. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. But I do recommend that you do it once. You can go to the Thinking Atheist, or you can go to the Thinking Atheist and watch some of the videos where he's talking about things, and you see what kind of deterioration of discourse. I mean, it's where discourse goes to die, in the comment sections. You go to the Amazing Atheist, you can hear him say what he says and read the comment sections. This is what many atheists in general come out to. Now, if you're a Black atheist, and a Cult of Dusty, the same thing. If you are a Black atheist and you're coming out and you don't know who to find or who to talk to, and you're still exploring your belief system or your new non-belief system, and this is what you're seeing: people that are attacking your experiences or degrading your existence, falling into very similar tropes and traps that are not actually logically sound if you actually dig just beneath the surface. And that's all you have to do. Just ask for the numbers just beneath the surface. Okay, it's straw man after straw man that supports a narrative of Black privilege, right? Black privilege. One of the conversations that I happen to have with one of the YouTube atheists is, they were telling me that Blacks have way too much power in America, and I said, what exactly do you think? What does that mean? You control the media, way too much influence in the media. We're breeding out of control and blah blah blah. I said, okay, so what is the number? What is the number when it comes to African Americans in the general population? What do you think that number is? And this number was 40%. It's like, wait a minute, you think America is 30 to 40% African American, and we have way too much power when it comes to politics, right? And this is a common recurring conversation that you would almost expect. Wait a minute, that's Fox News stuff right there, right? I mean, you're not going to have, really. I mean, I just had a conversation on dogma debate, which I still cannot believe. I'm still recovering. I had a conversation with Dr. Robert Price. Listen to that, and you'll see exactly what I mean. But African Americans are roughly 10% of the population. African American males are about 2.5. Media, we know that the most segregated places in the U.S. besides churches are newsrooms. There's not black BET isn't even owned by black people anymore. They sold out 6 years ago. So there's no big scary black puppet master that's controlling media, that's feeding a narrative, that is feeding fear, that is getting tons and tons and tons of views. A recent, and this is kind of infighting within the atheist community specifically, but there was a big blow up a couple of weeks ago with the amazing atheist, with a particular black writer, not me, with a black writer who called him out on his racism. And what happened? And I thought it was a good logical takedown of many of the tropes within the amazing atheist TJ's fallacious argument. And what we saw was a boost of close to 40,000 new subscribers for TJ. Well, that doesn't make me very hopeful that we have many atheists who are going to be sensitive or have any kind of empathy when it comes to brand new black atheists who are struggling to find a home in the secular community. If anything, it's going to repulse them. But yet these are the big pillars in atheists. These are the big names. TJ Kirk, huge name. Dusty, still huge name. And there are many, many others. Thunderfoot and Dark. I mean, they've all taken this anti-SJW position, but they've also conflated and colluded what they deem as SJW with actual social justice issues, and that poisons conversation.
I'm going to take a step back and see who else has questions. Anybody have something they want to jump up with?
Yeah, I'll join. Earlier you had said about groups of...
Come up here.
Okay.
Get the seat nice and warm for you. Because the lighting was so dark. Yeah, dark enough. So earlier you had talked about groups of atheists. Would it be more effective for people to do outreach individually, but yet not overtly?
Yes. Yeah. Building one-on-one relationships is much more effective than the 3-on-1 or group to group. Sometimes it's the only way you can get it done. But I find that building a coalition around relationships and the one-on-one dialogue, that works really, really well. Because you're not seeing. So one of the things that you're going to be fighting is this idea of a white savior, right? Whether it is in the potentially secular, fertile secular ground where you might be able to have a real conversation, you still have that cultural, racial baggage that you're bringing with you. Again, earned or unearned, it's there. So you're going to fight that. You sold us Jesus. Right? I mean, many African Americans are like, you gave us Jesus. You gave us white Jesus. Now you're trying to take away. Make up your mind.
Seriously. Are there other, as a group, would it be effective for us to try and build bridges between other groups that maybe I don't know since I'm not necessarily a part of the African American community? Do you know if there's groups that would be like a good middle ground beyond just Interfaith Alliance?
Yeah, outside of just interfaith alliance, I always tell people, if anything else, if nothing else, your local coalition or reason, if you have one, is going to be a good spot for secular alliances. And if the coalition is visible and out there in the secular community, then that winds up being a really interesting magnet. If you can get a couple of African Americans involved and visible in the coalition, that winds up, one person can be the tipping point. One person can be the tipping point, right? So you would do that. I would suggest that you do that, and then also make sure that other people know that you want to do this. So partnering with, I always tell people, call Mandisa or send Mandisa Thomas a quick note, because, when it comes to African Americans who are seeking any kind of connection nationwide, a lot of times they're going to Mandisa, and they'll say, hey, I'm in so and so, and I'm trying to find a secular home, black or whatever. Is there something local? And Mandisa will usually be able to connect people because she knows the entire planet somehow. So she can usually connect people as necessary. But your coalition, using the coalition resources, are probably your best bet in trying to do things as a larger community, in inter-networking as a group, as a big magnet, and trying to populate your coalition with minorities. If you can get that done, you'd be very surprised at the possible turnout.
Cool. Thank you. Anybody else? Come on.
It's a mob seat.
If you want to start, keep it over here.
Hi, Alex.
I
I am a fourth listener.
You are fourth. No, they let you in.
Yeah, I know it. It's terrible. No, it's you guys had me cracking up on the episode where you had Candace, I believe was her name, on the Happy Half. That was
Yes.
what the guy was calling the. Anyway, it was the Bears. That was.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, you mentioned TJ, and I know TJ and Dusty and all these other YouTube atheists are kind of, they are an acquired taste. You have to kind of get used to what they're saying. Is there any black YouTube atheists that you would recommend go to, or is there,
Most of them have, but most of the big ones have been chased off of YouTube. I mean, that's real. That's the reality. Most of them have been chased off of YouTube. Many of the blog writers have also either been chased off of their blogs, or no longer write, or have been forced to turn inward, and really try and just focus on building a secular African American community, instead of trying to bridge those gaps, simply because there hasn't been an overwhelming demand for it, and that's sad, for me, because it's not the experience that I had when I came out. When I came out in Dallas, I found an immediate home. I found many people who were very willing to embrace me for who I was, and we were able to have really good conversation, constructive conversation about philosophy, race, religion, etc., without necessary judgment. Now, of course, we challenged our own dogmas all the time, but we were able to do it, and still remain friends and what have you. Of course, when I talk about police brutality, that tends to, they tend to walk away, but that's the reality that I have, right? But still have the conversation. But no, there really isn't. I mean, if you just look at podcasts, who's the black name in podcasting right now? Right? I mean, you've got Ishmael, who does the angry black rant, and then probably the largest atheist podcast out there that goes between, depending on your numbers, depending on the week, that's either the Thinking Atheist or that's Dogma Debate, and that's me. And I got on the show by accident.
Well, so, David, I said hi. Thanks.
I sure will. Thank you for listening. Are you a paying member? Because we need more money.
Yes, I'm a paying member.
Who else?
Even though I don't like your politics sometimes, I'm still a paying member.
Okay, see, that's good. That's good. You still listen and you still engage, and you don't have to like my politics, but we can still have a conversation. And many of our partnerships don't have to be around politics or just politics. We don't have to agree on, because there's so many things that we can agree on that it makes sense for us to partner on regardless, right? I mean, when it comes to the church and state thing, it affects everybody. It absolutely affects everyone. So I tell people, yes, you should be supporting the FFRF and some of the class action suits that they try and bring forward, or just the lawsuits that they do. Same thing with some of the ACLU and Secular Coalition of America, because those have impacts on everyone, and sometimes they have an even bigger impact that you may not realize in minority communities, abortion being one of the bigger ones.
Okay, so I just want to thank you for being available and for the group for having this topic. I'm an atheist. I've been a member, paying and otherwise, of the Oklahoma Atheists ever since I moved here. In fact, the atheist group, when I moved here from Florida, in 2003, I Googled to see if there were any progressive groups, and the first group I located online was the atheist group. So, thank you. But for the most part, I don't come to these meetings because, frankly, the topics just don't interest me, but this one really does. I'm a political organizer. I've been a political organizer for about 30 years. Fortunately, for me, most of that time I've been able to make that a profession. I work on issues that, progressive issues. I work on primarily anti-war at this point, anti-militarism, anti-nukes, economic justice, and most recently I've started a chapter here in Oklahoma of Surge, which is showing up for racial justice. And that's a group that gives, that really focuses on getting white allies for the Black Lives Matter movement. And so I'm very happy that this group is doing this. I've been an atheist for, in my organizing work for most of it. I've been an out atheist for at least 20 years in that work, and I'm usually the only one, or at least the only one that's vocal about it. I don't make a big deal about it, but I don't pretend to be something that I'm not. And the thing is, and that I really wanted to say, is that most of those issues are the people that are working on that are people of faith. So to me, those issues are more important than my atheism, okay? I make it clear, people know that, but I don't make that the issue. I want to work on social justice, I want to work on racial justice, economic justice, I want to work on those issues. I want to, and that's my primary focus. So I would love to see more atheists involved in that. And just as you were talking, I thought, I think what I'm going to start doing is, I'm not going to wear, I'm not a real t-shirt person, but get a button, something that indicates in a small, subtle way that I'm an atheist. Because like you were saying, when I do something, a lot of when people say, God bless you, I just usually say, you're welcome, and I don't. But I think it's also important that atheists, it's like you were talking about a PR issue, because a lot of people think atheists are just immoral people, and I think it's really important that we overcome that, because it's obviously not true. So I think if you're respectful and you get the respect that you show, That's been my experience. So I would urge anyone that's interested in working on racial justice issues, particularly if you're white, to get involved with Surge, start a chapter here at the school if that's where you're focused. But get involved because the times are very critical right now and we need all the people we can get.
I want to say something that because thank you. Getting allies out is actually one of the more difficult things that we have because sometimes we eat allies unknowingly, and they think they take it very personally, and so what we see as frustration comes out as anger sometimes, which is very easy for people to take as a personal attack or personal affront. And you see that very much with the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, there is, because I think for some people it's very difficult to first acknowledge or accept the message that Black Lives Matter, and then you have the organization that is Black Lives Matter. And sometimes they just don't sync up in our allies' heads. So yes, you can sign off on the idea behind the movement, but you can't sign off on the movement. But if you can't sign off on the movement, what in terms of alternatives can you provide if you are a humanist? Now, I tend to be very, very hard on, because I consider myself a humanist, I tend to be very, very hard on humanists because they tend to slant one way versus being right down the middle. They, for some reason, they don't understand that Black Lives Matter too, and they'll immediately default all lives matter. It's like, well, absolutely, all lives matter, which is exactly why you should have no issue saying that Black Lives Matter too, and the two is often implied and blah blah blah, and so we have issues with that. I'm actually very proud. What was announced, I think 3 months ago, it might have been less. I think 2 months ago, was the American Humanist Association actually has set up four different pillars for social justice and equality, and one of them happens to be I happen to be involved in it. It's the Black Humanist Alliance within the American Humanist Association, the AHA, and Anthony Pinn is involved, Sincere Caribou is involved, and several other activists, Black activists, LGBTQ activists in their pillar, et cetera. And they're doing real outreach, not just within the atheist movement, where it might be a little harder to find allies because, like I said, it's just hard when you can't see outside of just the atheist world. And so, yeah, they are going out there and having real conversations across interfaith tables, across socioeconomic leaders, having conversations with socioeconomic leaders, talking politics when you have other strictly secular or strictly atheist groups that say social justice is scope creep. You have to find an outlet where it's not, and humanism should be it, right? So you should be able to go out there and do that. Now, what's also really cool about what I'm seeing, and I do travel for work, I also do travel for the atheist community, whether it's dogma debate or my speaking. I have found an interesting new phenomenon, which is if we go back to what civil rights and the civil rights movement was, it's changing, it's shifting. And when you would have or expect someone like Al Sharpton to show up, that's not happening anymore. Nor is the front line super saturated by Reverend so-and-so, Reverend Cash Money, Deacon Make Me Rich, doesn't matter, whatever. You're not seeing those anymore. What you are seeing is very young, 20 to 30, 18 to 30-year-old activists that are asking a really pertinent question. What is the church actually doing for the Black community? What is God actually doing for us? And so they're beginning to challenge in a way that we saw 30 some odd years ago with the A. Philip Randolphs, etc., that was lost when the Black community stopped and began mourning the loss of their heroes. I'm beginning to see that again, and that gives me reason to be really excited that maybe we can tap in and find these new atheist activists who are socially conscious and they're motivated by and they may not know what to call themselves yet. That's really fertile soil to bridge and partner. That's really exciting. Now, what's a little scary is they tend to be really angry. But some of that is you kind of have to be there to understand it. It's exactly, I was in Louisiana not too long ago. We had the Alton shooting, we had the Philander shooting, and I happened to go down into New Orleans, and I'll be writing about this for the anniversary, the Katrina anniversary. And I went into the Ninth Ward. I stayed in the French Quarter, which was the New Orleans that I always knew, and then I made it back out to the Ninth Ward. And if you want to understand the dichotomy that is American life as a Black person, W.E.B. Du Bois talks about this veil of double consciousness when trying to cohere your reality as a Black person in America. Go down there and experience this amazing disappointment that you'll have and suffering that you have being a Black person in Louisiana. I understand. I used to laugh at Kanye when Kanye West said George Bush doesn't like Black people. I was like, oh, shut up, right? Really easy to dismiss him. And he gives you a lot more to dismiss. But on this one particular piece, if you make it out to New Orleans, if you make it out to Louisiana, even Baton Rouge and into the outskirts, you will understand how time stands still in the American South. And so you can understand why that divide still exists and why that anger still exists and why you have so much anger. It's just completely different. And even being a Northerner, a former Northerner who sees racism through Northern eyes, and being in Dallas and seeing it through more urban eyes, seeing what I saw in New Orleans was like taking a step back 30 years. So yeah, we do need to have more conversations like that. Okay, yes.
I was just going to say that I'm not sure if you can tell, but I'm actually mixed. But usually whenever I have conversations with my Black friends and family members, they say it's sort of my white side that's the atheist in me. And it's just sort of an interesting sort of way of looking at it. But my main question I was going to ask you is there anything of the Black Lives Matter movement that you would change or just leave it the way it is, or something that you would, for me, like I say, like, I'm kind of going back and forth on if it needs like a figurehead, like a main person to sort of maybe talk to the media, and so like this is our actual message, as opposed to just what gets put on, the news networks.
What winds up happening, and this was very consciously done, to make it a figureheadless or figureless movement, was what happened to the figures of the old civil rights movement. Malcolm X, assassinated. Martin Luther King, assassinated. Stokely Carmichael got out before he was assassinated with credible attempts. List after list. Marcus Garvey, assassinated. I mean, the list goes on. So it makes sense to have a leaderless movement where you're attacking, if you're angry white America, you're attacking cells or you're attacking the message. But it's still kind of hard to attack a message that Black Lives Matter too, so you can attack the methods pretty easily. And Fox News is doing a great job of it. Now, the problem with that, of course, is it being a leaderless movement, is you have very different reactions and different kinds of organizers with different levels of education, different kinds of anger, etc. The of Black Lives Matter in Houston happens to be an atheist, right? And so he has a very different way of approaching organizing versus what you would see in Baltimore with D-Ray or Quab or some of the other organizers there, because those are reactions to different circumstances, different environments. If I'm in Baltimore or Ferguson, I look at Black Lives Matter movements and I'm like, how do you fix that without first addressing the underlying realities that gave rise to those movements? Especially when you start looking at Ferguson specifically, where it was so bad, regardless of what you believe happened with Mike Brown or not, it was so bad that the Department of Justice appointed a judge that vacated almost 2 years worth of warrants because they were warrantless, where the DOJ talks about this predation of poor Black people. So how do you mitigate that anger? How do you adjust for it? It's just going to be really hard versus, like I said, what you see in Houston. And then, of course, we had what happened in Dallas, which was not Black Lives Matter, but America really needed it to be Black Lives Matter. I talk about this a little bit. America needed the cop killers to be Black Lives Matter, because that way you get to infiltrate, discredit, and somehow minimize the movement. And even within the atheist community, there were tons of people that were jumping on the bandwagon. Black Lives Matter killed cops. It turns out that it wasn't, and there was no coordinated attempt from Black Lives Matter organizers, et cetera, to kill anybody. But America really wanted that to be the case, because that way you get to bury the problem. So I don't know that there's a good answer as to how you change a movement, because it's a reactionary movement.
All right, anybody else have a question you want to come up and ask? Yeah, come on.
This is more of a general question, but why do you think people are so afraid of us? Like, my mom is kind of terrified of the fact that I'm an atheist because she doesn't, I don't know if she doesn't understand what it means or in that kind of sense, but people are, like you say, I'm an atheist, or like you're talking about people not wanting to vote for Bernie Sanders because he's supposedly an atheist. Why is it that you think that we have this, such a strong stigma attached to it?
Because atheists are hard to control. If you challenge, you have to remember that part of religion, or the purpose of religion, is to control. But not necessarily as in specifically controlling people's lives, but think moral management. It's really easy to see it, why you would give your slaves, something that says behave. But why wouldn't you extract that to the general populace as well? And so if you have that, it's really easy to make sure that people are moral, because you're telling them that without this morality, without religion, there's eternal damnation, there's punishment, etc. And most people will accept and adopt that, and definitely internalize that. So I think there's a massive fear of non-conformity that all atheists are subject to, and I think it's warranted. I think it's warranted within the framework of religious context. You didn't earn it. It's not like atheists are going out there and committing genocide in the U.S. or going out there and murdering at a higher rate than Christians or any other religious people. It's just you are the unknown. And then you also have this thing of we still are a very supernatural culture where we accept the devil and superstition, etc. And so if you're not controlled by God, if you don't submit by God, if you're not humbled because of God and religion, then you're an unknown. If you are really you're a revolutionary. I said this a few I think it was a year ago, and Greta Christina tweeted it out. We're just, and she said, and I said, if you are an atheist in America, you're already a revolutionary because you are bucking a major trend. You're saying that despite all odds, you are pushing the biggest question, or you're bucking the biggest question, the one thing together, and that's religion. We're not a Christian nation, but we are a nation of Christians. You just have to look at the numbers to accept that. So because you are different is scary.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question they want to come up and ask?
Yeah. Hi. So what do you think, you talked about media earlier before, what do you think about the prevalence of religion in music, specifically? Let's say Kanye West, and he'll talk about God a lot, and I'll listen to Kendrick Lamar, and then a lot of his music has religion, like he'll talk about God and all that stuff, but he'll also talk about social issues. So is there any way for people to not be religious and be have like compelling arguments or something of the sort, but then it seems to me like there seems to be no way for that to happen?
Not yet, and it's because of the stereotypes that are reinforced in culture, and it is cultural. It's a phenomenon in cultural adherence. When you have that archetype there, you will constantly try and mimic that, especially when you don't have your own particular culture. And again, in African Americans, it's a very unique culture that is only a few years old if you really think about it, because they've been told exactly what. Anyway, but when you look at people like Kanye and Kendrick and so many others, you have to remember that music is descriptive, but it's also reinforcing, right? And so until they decide, or African Americans decide, that this is not the message that they want to hear, you're going to continue to have very, very high levels of religiosity present in music. Now, I also call BS on that, because the 5%ers are extraordinarily represented in rap music in the Black community. African Americans have 5%ers. The 5%ers, minus the racial issues, they're effectively atheist. They do not believe in supernaturalism, right? They are kind of an offshoot of the Nation of Islam. And if we could actually attack, Wu-Tang Clan was out there at the recent rally. It's not because they're religious; they're non-religious. But they're 5%ers. They're kind of reformed 5%ers, and they've dropped a lot of the racial tags and epithets that come with being a 5%er. But they are effectively atheists. That there's a reason. And you have people like Busta Rhymes, Jay-Z, etc., that are also not religious. And some of them are anti-religious, but they have to sell their music as well. So there's only so much that they can be vocal.
Does anybody else have a question before I ask kind of the last one that I had? No? Okay. Cool. Did you have a chance to see the SPLC's pamphlet on the Trump effect in schools from a few months back?
I don't remember that one, no.
Okay. Let me ask the question this way then. Is the prevalence that Donald Trump and his message has been getting, is it exacerbating things, making things worse for the issues of race in America, or is it just bringing the issues that are already there to the surface, or some kind of combination of both?
Man, I get in trouble with this one. Okay, so I'm going to give you the same response I gave Seth and I gave David Smalley months ago. If you are surprised at Donald Trump, then you haven't been listening to your Black friends. That's one. Black Americans have experienced in America this level of not just apathy, but anti anything other than usness. This persecution of many Christians believe that there's true Christian persecution. Donald Trump represents white persecution in America, where they believe that everyone is out to get them. It has always been there. It has always been there. We never addressed it. We stopped talking about it in 1969. 1967 was loving, right? Which allowed interracial marriage. The Fair Housing Act, the Civil Rights Act. We're talking about roughly 40 years ago, not even 50 years ago. And we accepted the fact that everything was fine now because those were implemented, and all you had to do was, the laws were implemented, all you had to do was enforce them. Unfortunately, that's not been the reality. If we were to actually see real equality, I should see it in representation in the Senate. I should see it representation in the House. I should see it in representation in law enforcement. I should see that in the disproportionate shooting and killing of African American males, regardless whether you believe they deserve the execution or extrajudicial executions that they've been getting street side. I should see a different number, but I don't. So I would say that what you're seeing is the ooze bubble up and form Vigo, the Carpathian, Trump, the Carpathian, this massive specter that has been fed by this undercurrent that is anger, that is persecution, that is anti-PC and everything else. Yes, Trump is Vigo. Now, is it going to get worse? I think if you have a Trump presidency, it will get worse because not just of the racial issue, but because of the very pro-authoritarian message that the Republican Party is pushing. It is comply or die, not necessarily on the streets, but everywhere else. It's comply or die, and we're going to see some variation of that enacted in Congress. We're going to see it with policy, not just policing, and it would be a very interesting 4 years under a Trump presidency. Not one that I would look forward to.
I hear you there. All right, man. I'm gonna let you go. We really, really appreciate you taking some time out today to talk with us. It's been real educational. It's been a lot of fun too. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me.
I'll be in touch, man. Have a good one.
All right, thank you. You too. Bye-bye.